Hello and welcome to this video. I just want to briefly talk about layers because layers are so fundamental to the way that Photoshop works that it's worth getting them clear in your head right from the start. Now this photo along with dozens of others can be downloaded if you enroll on the course below, The Craft of Photoshop Solid Foundations. It's a 24-hour course covering everything a beginner needs to know about Photoshop from a designer who's been using it for around about 30 years. That's longer than most. Oh, and I also spent a couple of years as a teacher. So that's a 24-hour course, along with a PDF with notes on all the videos so that you don't have to make your own notes, which is going to be a huge time saver for you. Anyway, let's get back to this video. And if you come to the right-hand side of Photoshop's workspace and come down to the bottom, you see this little group of panels. And the one we have selected at the moment is Layers. And this shows you all the different layers that make up your Photoshop file. At the moment, there's only one layer there. That is the background layer. Any JPEG that comes out of your camera is just a series of different colored pixels, and they have to be stored somewhere. So they're all stored on a layer called background. That is the default name, but here's my problem. Supposing I decide I want to paint in pink all over that window area. Why? I don't know, but hey, it's just a demonstration. So I get my pen, my brush tool is selected, and I scribble all over it like this. And for 5 whole minutes, I think, great, I'm an artist. Then I come to my senses and realize I've got a problem. I've just drawn all over my picture, and the only way I can get rid of that is undoing it. So I press Ctrl or Command+Z on my keyboard a few times to get my picture back to the start. There has to be a better way. Well, yes, there is. Come down to the Layers panel and see this little icon here, which I'm just hovering over. If I click on that, I get a new layer called Layer 1. Here's rule number 1. Name your layers as you go along. So I double click and I'll call this brushstrokes and enter. Now I'll do the same thing. I'll do a few brushstrokes around here. And again, 5 minutes later, I think to myself, you know what, that wasn't a good idea. But look, here's the nice thing. Supposing I decided, well, actually, I wanted those brushstrokes all over the window on the right-hand side. Not a problem. I can come up to my Move tool or V on my keyboard. And look at that. I can move the layer over to wherever I want it to go. That's because those brushstrokes are stored on the brushstrokes layer. It's entirely separate. It's like a thin sheet of glass which I've laid over my original photograph, and it doesn't affect the original photograph in any shape or form. But the other nice thing about it is this is like magic glass. It's not just a case of moving it around. If I press Ctrl or Command+T, I get a little box there, and I can move and resize and rotate this around as much as I want. If I hold down my Control or Command key again and come to one of these corner bits, my cursor changes into it looks like a little white arrow with a black surround. If I do that, I can now distort my brushstrokes any way I want, and when I want to commit to that, I press Enter. There's my new distorted brushstrokes. If I press Control or Command+U, I get hue and saturation, and I can change the color and saturation and the lightness of my brushstrokes. Okay, for now, let's not worry too much about that Control or Command+T to transform those brushstrokes and the Control or Command+U to change the color of the brushstrokes. The point I'm making is the brushstrokes layer is independent of all the pixels that make up my photograph on the background layer. Now, supposing I don't like that, I can come down to this little eye icon, click on it, and the entire layer becomes invisible. If I click on it again, it becomes visible. If I make it invisible for a second and I come to my brush tool, you can see because it's invisible, I get this little sign. It's like a keep out sign. That means I'm not allowed to paint on the brushstrokes layer. It's currently selected. You can tell it's selected because it's a lighter gray than its surrounding area. But that is just a little safety feature to stop you from accidentally painting on an invisible layer. And then when you come and make it visible again, you think, oh, look what I just did. Okay, so for now, I'll make this layer invisible. I will select my background layer. I will come to a selection tool. Let's just try the quick selection tool. And I'll come to that window and this window here. Don't worry, we will be talking about selections, I promise. I will press my Alt or Option key just to start subtracting from the selection like this. and again. Then I will press Control or Command plus C to copy. Then I'll press Control or Command plus V to paste. Watch what happens. I get a new layer called Layer 1, and if I make my background layer invisible, you can see I copied those two windows onto a new layer called Layer 1. Let's rename this to Windows, and I'll make my background layer visible again. Well, for those windows, because they are on their own separate layer, let's press Control or Command plus U again, and we can change the hue of those windows like this. You can change the saturation into something pretty awful. But the point is, you can take bits from your background layer, store them on new layers, and make changes to them, but you don't affect the original image. Okay, so to get rid of a layer, you come down to the little trash can icon, click on that. It says, "Are you sure about that?" Yes, I'm sure about that. Thank you very much. Now here's a very common working practice. I will come to my background layer. I will right click on it and I will select Duplicate Layer. I get a little dialog box, and in this box, it's asking me what do I want to call the new layer. Well, I want to call the new layer Base. This is my new base layer, and I can make my background layer invisible. And this is like a little safety feature because, for example, supposing I'll come to my zoom tool, I'll zoom in where it says barley. I will come to my clone stamp tool. Don't worry, there is a lesson for this. And supposing I decide I don't like that word, I will hold down my Alt or Option key and I will start to erase it like this. Erasing things, oh yes, you're going to be learning about those. How to get rid of zits, ex-partners, you name it, we'll be doing it. That is a very quick and dirty job, but we're just demonstrating principles at the moment. And I will press Control or Command plus 0 to zoom to fit my picture. And if you look down in the bottom right-hand corner, the writing's gone. So then you show this to the client, who promptly throws a fit because that jar with barley written on it was given to them by their great-grandmother or whatever. Not a problem. Look, because I duplicated my background layer, called it base, and made my changes to the base layer, if I make it invisible, there's my original background layer. I can duplicate it all over again, and we're good to go. But then supposing the client changes their mind, great, there you go. There's your jar that's definitely not filled with barley. Now, so far we've talked about one kind of layer, a simple pixel layer. It can store the pixels of your picture, or it can store brushstrokes or whatever. There are different kinds of layers. For example, if I come up to adjustments, I've got a series of adjustment layers here. And if I choose one, let's try black and white. Click on that. Do you notice how everything suddenly turns to black and white? And if you come down to the layers panel, you can see there's a layer here called black and white 1. It's made of two parts. It's made of the actual adjustment layer, and I've just clicked on the layer thumbnail, and it also has something called a layer mask attached to it. You can tell it's attached because of this little chain sign, and if I click on the thumbnail, I could do things with the layer mask. Let's just quickly try this just to prove the point. I've clicked on the adjustment layer, layer thumbnail, and if I start moving, say the reds around, can you see how parts of the picture change? And if I take the yellows and I move that, if I make this invisible for a second, well, you can see on the underlying layer, I've got reds in the shadowy area, but then I've got yellows around where this light is. And if I turn on the layer again, and I move the yellow, can you see I'm altering the yellow bits? I'm making them darker or lighter, and I can do the same with the red bits. I can make them darker or lighter. But the nice thing about this adjustment layer is it's not permanently altering the pixels. If I make it invisible again, there's my original layer. And this ability to change the look of your picture, but not permanently, is known as non-destructive image editing. And that is one of the cornerstones of modern image editing. If I make the black and white layer visible again, it doesn't have to be it's on or it's off. Look, I've got an opacity slider. If I take that to 50%, can you see how I'm getting some very knocked back muted colors? I can vary the opacity from 0% and nudge it up all the way up to 100%. So the usefulness of that black and white layer is now increased 100-fold because you have an opacity of 100%. Not only that, you have something called layer blend mode. We will be talking about them. And if you take a look at this, this alters the look of the picture in different ways. And with things like this, You can adjust the opacity along with the layer blend mode to achieve all manner of different effects. I'll take this back to normal. So that is an adjustment layer, which is a different kind of layer. You also have something called a layer mask. And if I click on the layer mask thumbnail, I will select my paintbrush. I need to select black. I'll make my brush a bit bigger. And now, see that? I can paint out my adjustment layer only in certain areas. If I take my opacity way down, something like 11 or 12%, I can gradually fade the layer mask like this. Layer masks sometimes give people problems. I will be introducing them to you fairly early on, and we will be using them a lot throughout the course so you can really practice with them. Okay, so let's try another kind of a layer. Let's come to our shapes. Let's choose a rectangle. I will draw out a rectangle, which is a vector shape. Watch what happens in my layer panel when I do. I will drag this out. I get a blue outline of a rectangle, and I also get a new layer called rectangle 1. I can come up to my fill layer. I can change that to whatever color I want. I can also change that to an 80s chrome effect, which goes really, really well with this particular picture. Okay, this is starting to look awful, but I am just making a point here. You also have something like a text layer. And if I type the word hi in a nice big friendly letters, you can see I get another layer here called layer 1. That T in the thumbnail stands for T for text. So I've got pixel layers, I've got adjustment layers, I've got shape layers, I've got text layers. Let's highlight that. Give it a slightly off-white color. And each of the layers I've shown you does something slightly different. And everything that makes up your image has to live on a layer. It can be text, it can be an adjustment layer. You want things to be neat, you want things to be tidy. So I can come and select my brush strokes layer, and then I can shift click and select my base layer. And that means everything apart from my background layer is selected. And I can either right click and come to group from layers, or if I click on that, I get a group called group 1. I will double click that and I'll call that fix, because in theory, everything in that group was supposed to fix my layer. I can make that invisible. And there's my original layer. I can make it visible. I can open it up like this, and I can edit the individual layers. Well, I do not want that, so I will delete that. And as for that chrome rectangle, I definitely do not want that. And so on and so forth. And when I've made my changes, I can close my group. Okay, that's layers in a nutshell. If you enjoyed this video, there's 24 more hours worth of videos just like this. If you click on the link below and enroll on the course, and if you hit the subscribe button, you'll be able to follow along when I bring you more videos and more knowledge than you can shake a stick at. So I'll see you then.